Welcome to RIYL. I'm Dan Kennedy, filling in for Brian Heater, who is out sick on a non-COVID related note and should be back soon. In the spirit of short introductions, let me just tell you that Brian sat down with Colin Newman from the band Wire, a band that has been making music since 1977, a band that is, to me, at once intimidatingly cool and also unbelievably accessible for a band that has remained so totally uncompromised in their creative vision. Pick any album, play that album or track, and before you know it, you're down a wonderful rabbit hole that is decades deep. Maybe you came by Wire in a very cool way. Maybe you discovered them on your own. I am not that cool. I didn't know about Wire until REM covered their song Strange on their album Document in 1987. I learned a lot today listening to Brian Heater interview Colin Newman from Wire.
Basically, I have a pool of 17 hours of music from which I can choose at random. So the four people of the band completely different the way they approach DJing.
And music, it sounds like.
Yeah, and music. And my approach is very much, I've just gone through and selected a bunch of tracks and I want to actually DJ. I want to choose on the night what I play. And about reading the crowd. I'm really not a professional DJ, but I want to have the experience of, like, I'm going to play that track and then see how that went and see how this other one goes, or if anybody takes any notes at all,
17 hours, that's just, you have a hard drive full of 17 hours of music? Or
a laptop. But
very specifically for...
Oh, yeah, no, I created basically a pool of a list, a playlist.
I assume this is not your first time DJing?
I've DJed quite a lot, actually. Yeah. But, mate, I've tended to cheat a bit, and prepare a lot beforehand. And this time I thought, no, the preparation will be the selection, but I just get the right software, the right hardware, and just actually do it for real.
Is there a sense, though, of what plays particularly well in front of one of your sets?
No.
No.
No idea at all. I really have no idea.
Yeah.
I think it depends very, very much on the crowd and very much on how they feel that the DJ is present.
Just in terms of how you're actually sort of interacting? I mean,
how you're perceived on the stage.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically saying they're pushing buttons on a laptop, right? Or is there...
So I'm selecting tracks, basically.
Yeah.
You either kind of get into it because you think, oh, well, that's really interesting track selection, or I didn't know that person liked that record or whatever, or people just think, oh, it's just the music before the band come on.
I get the sense that one of the common themes of the bands over the decades has been the fact that, like, there's not a lot of overlap when it comes to the music that each of you enjoy.
There's some, to be quite honest. There is some, but we do have different taste, in music.
What brought you together musically? It sounds like you're quite different people.
That's a whole story of how that came together.
Yeah.
So, it's quite a famous story. It was a kind of an end-of-term art school kind of band that was put together, which involved myself, Bruce Gilbert, and a guy called George Gill. And we played this one gig, and we were terrible. We played George's songs, basically. But we felt for some reason that we should continue, and the three of us were playing through one amp in my bedroom in Watford. And then we found a bass player and a drummer, namely Graham and Robert. We played as a 5-piece for a while, still playing George's songs. Then George broke his leg trying to steal an amplifier from some band, and he went in hospital. And classic, band style, we started rehearsing without him, and the first thing we discovered was that his songs sounded a lot better without him in them. And then and then a friend suggested that we get rid of him. So we did. And then Graham came and said, I can write text. And I said, I can write tunes. He handed me the text to Slowdown, and that's how we started. So it's almost chance. Of course. When Paul suggested, maybe you should get rid of George, he's holding you back. I mean, he was pushing an open door. I mean, not that we'd even discussed it. I mean, typical bands, you don't talk about anything ever, especially when you're in the 20s. You know? It
just hadn't even really occurred to you at the time?
It's not that it hadn't occurred. It hadn't occurred. It's just stuff happens.
Sure.
It wasn't like anyone was thinking, had some big forward plan. It was just getting to the next gig, playing gigs that people thought were any good. And for us to think that we were any good ourselves.
You didn't have your sights necessarily set on being superstars at the time.
Definitely not. No, I mean, more like the aim was to be good. And then it became obvious that what Wire was an artistic project. I mean, it has been since more or less day one.
The songwriting process hasn't really changed all that much.
On one basic level, no. I mean, I still, in the history of Wire, I've written, I don't know, between 70 and 80%, maybe over 80% of the tunes. I've never done a calculation on it.
Sure.
Graham has written quite a lot of the text.
Yeah.
But other people have written things as well. But that's kind of how it is, especially over the last 10 years. I mean, it's either stuff written by Graham and I together, or me writing on my own, or Graham writing on his own. Those are the songwriting combinations that we have now.
Are the group of you generally isolated from one another when it's not time to tour or to play in studio?
No, we're in constant communication.
Yeah.
Remember that, there's a record company which I run, so I'm communicating with the band all the time about lots of things. So yeah, we're talking by email. Not necessarily socialising, but I mean, we're talking by email and just making decisions. You have to plan things an awful long time ahead. You can't do anything, with 5 minutes notice. I mean, you have to be, making an album. I mean, Mind Hive started, the initial recording was in September 2018. That was when the process started. And I already knew that we were going for a January 2020 release date at that point.
There's a sense after each album, after each tour, that this is going to continue on indefinitely?
I think we're getting to an age now when we have to think about what we do in the future. So I think this year, although it appears that we're doing quite a lot if you compare it to like 10 years ago.
You announced a West Coast tour today.
Yeah, we're actually doing much less. It's hard to do USA in less dates than we're doing, but we're not doing the 6-week wham bam go everywhere tour. We're doing a short tour on the East Coast and the middle, and a short tour on the West Coast. That's kind of how we're arranging things. European tour is 1 week. British tour was 1 week.
What are the kind of practical day-to-day considerations when it comes to, I don't know, I guess just getting older and being on tour?
Well, if you think about the fact that, I mean, with Wire has gone through, if you think about it historically, it's gone through phases when it ceased to exist. And that's partly because the reasons for doing it became less important than the reasons for not doing it.
What does that mean exactly?
That means exactly what you want to interpret it to mean.
Yeah. I mean, like and personal drama, or I think one of the things that has been going on over the last, really 20 years, but more formally in the last 10 years, is a process by which everybody's ideas are accommodated. So you don't get to that point where, somebody thinks it's okay to drive the bus off the cliff. So, and one of those things is, management of expectation of what anybody really wants out of it. People want to be able to do it, but they don't want to be, and that I think applies to everybody really. I mean, some of us approaching our 70s, you don't want to be in a situation where you're touring away from home a lot of the time because you need the money to live. Yeah. I mean, we're in a very good position now because we fundamentally own our 70s catalogue, which is a source of income, and it continues to be a source of income month on month, which puts us in a much better position. And so that when we're releasing new things and doing new things, that's kind of icing on top of that. So it means that we're in
we're not in a bad place financially, so nobody has to do anything. We do things because we want to do them.
You seem to imply that at least in a certain sense, things have become a little more democratic, but that's sort of when it comes to these practical issues. Is that the case across the board as a band?
I think you have to include everybody's point of view, and if somebody is like way off from where everybody else is, I mean, we'll then discuss it and find out what it is, what their concerns are, and why are they thinking like that, and then. There is a sort of group, some kind of group mentality that we will all come together on something and say, yeah, okay, well, actually, this is the best approach. I have my misgivings, but, I mean, it's that kind of, I think, as I said, bands in their 20s, I mean, tend not to talk about anything ever, or groups of blokes in their 20s, they just make like jokes. And we kind of got to a point where we have to talk. Mm-hmm. We have to talk about stuff, and we don't always talk about the kind of emotional issues. I mean, they do come up; they can be problematic.
We're still a group of men.
Yeah, but there is a need for engaging in a practical sense with it, and also to not just bottle it up. But if somebody has something to say, well, then they should say it. I mean, there's that kind of thing. So it is just. Yeah, it's a kind of democracy. I mean, the music isn't necessarily always democratic in the way it's made, but it is a matter of how things come out the best. Everybody has to understand. I think everybody does understand that whatever the direction of travel on a particular piece is, it's just to get it to its best, so it shines the most.
That's kind of what I was getting at, was this question of whether the band has become more democratic creatively. I mean, I talk to a lot of bands, and the consensus often seems to be that, at least from a certain standpoint, it needs to be a little more dictatorial. There needs to be one person with kind of a clear vision.
I tend to have a vision about things, but I'm very open to what other people have to say. I mean, Matt is very, very creative and makes a lot of suggestions, and you allow Graham and Robert to play to their strengths. Let them do the things that they're good at doing. Why stop them doing what they're good at doing? Try and make them do things they can't do. That doesn't work. Not that you can make anybody in Y do anything ever. I should had. This is that. It isn't. Why I get listed on the records as doing the production. That's because I produce the music. I don't produce the people. The producers. Nobody's in charge.
Whitney, your tour manager, had mentioned to me that you're still in the process of kind of putting some of the final touches on, I guess maybe like a press release that was due out today.
Oh, no, there's a new record coming out. Yeah, this was always going to hit when I was on the road. We have a second release this year called 1020. It's a bit of a strange history to it. There were a set of tracks which were recorded around the time of Red Bark Tree, and they were initially given away as a free EP with mail order copies of that album. We never really released them commercially. And then when we did the 2017 set, there were things in that set which fell in the same category, which is pieces which either never really got properly recorded or have been recorded, but we do in such a different way live as to be worthwhile revisiting in the studio. They're called strays. That's the kind of general category of them. So we recorded, when we did the last session, we recorded 3 new pieces, and there was one that had been left over from the previous album, and put it all together and said, wow, that sounds amazing. The original idea was to actually have those 4 tracks that were from the more recent ones. We would do like a special edition of Mind Hive, and then include them as extra tracks, something like that. And then I just thought, what are we going to put in it? I mean, we did a special edition for Silver Lead, pictures of the band in the studio. Very nice, but how many books of pictures of bands in the studio can you have?
Especially these days, people have everything on the computer.
I mean, we've done the special editions of the first 3 releases, and also the thing that actually happened when we were recording a Mind Hive first initial recording was we had film crew, or actually the second recordings from film crew, because that was all part of the documentary.
the people in the film documentary. So we thought, well, it's been filmed, that's better than a book. So then Phil from Cargo, who is actually the boss of Cargo, but that's our physical distribution. He's also our label manager, was saying, well, you should have something for Record Store Day. And I thought, well, why don't we put all that stuff on the record for Record Store Day? So the 4 tracks still had to be mixed, so kind of mixed them, like it was all done after Mind Hive. Put that thing together when it's mastered. It's like, this is amazing. It's a great record.
You sound like genuinely surprised.
Yeah, genuinely surprised. It's like, the initial Strays was 10 years ago. How many times you listened to that?
Yeah.
Not at all.
But they felt sort of like castaways to you?
It's just not like castaways. It's just like putting all that together makes a very nice Record Store Day release. So it's totally within the spirit of Record Store Day. This is the absolute polar opposite of, pink copy of Bruce Springsteen's greatest hits or whatever. Something that's been released 85 times before. I'm not picking up Paul Bruce, but it was the first name that popped into my head.
Bruce will be fine.
Yeah. So, it's like, and so many independent labels behave even worse than majors.
Sure.
They just put out absolute exploitative crap and stuff on coloured vinyl and all that shit. And, fans feel like they're duty bound to buy it because you're not a real fan if you didn't buy that and you didn't queue up on Record Store Day. And it's nothing new that they haven't got already. Here, this is an original release for Record Store Day. That would be worth queuing up for. Also, of course, because we have an audience outside of Record Store Day, we are going to do a regular release in June of it at CD. Make it more widely available. There's now an absurd situation in how that is in Britain, because in America you don't have chains anymore for music.
Sure.
But there is still one chain in Britain for music, and that chain doesn't get involved in Record Store Day. It's like, why not? It's like everyone against Amazon, really. It's like, Amazon will undercut. Amazon is the king of convenience. I shop at Amazon just like anybody else does. But they undercut everybody. They put bricks and mortar shops. That's how we describe it in Britain. Under a lot of pressure. Those are supporting those shops is a reason to be involved in Record Store Day. If in the first place, it's not like because we're also indie. It's like, no, this is about bricks and mortar retail. It's about being able to walk into a shop and hear a piece of music you've never heard before in your life and think, I think that's really good. What's that? And go ask the person behind the counter, and they say, "Oh, it's this."
Yeah.
Or they've got it propped up somewhere saying "now playing" or something like that, which is an experience you're not going to get from Spotify or Apple Music.
There's also a sense of obligation when you're asking people to pay that much money. People aren't used to paying, money for music in the same way anymore. That you want to give them a good product.
Well, I think I'm not certainly not into the idea of hiking prices for Record Store Day.
I just mean, in terms of actually going to the store and buying something versus listening on Spotify.
There is still pretty much a culture of buying records and CDs. People do buy them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of okay. I don't look down on people who consume music digitally. Apart from people who just expect to get it all for free. But
if there's somebody going to the store and buying something, you don't want to give them a bunch of castaways because they're spending their hard-earned money on a product. Yeah.
So this is it's a strong record, and it was on the Record Store Day list on the 5th of March. But that's not an announcement of anything. That's just a big long list, and our record would have disappeared. So we did a physical launch today with a track called Small Black Reptile, which is a new, an extremely updated version of a track from Manscaped. It's the same tune, but everything else is different.
You don't strike me as somebody who's particularly nostalgic about old songs, but when the opportunity does present itself to go back and re-examine something, how different does the band then versus now feel?
Well, the thing is that actually, in terms of the live, because all this comes from the live set. In terms of the live set, there are 4 categories of thing. Okay, there is the new song that is not on any record. There is the new song, which is on the most recent record. In this case,
sure.
And then there's the new old song, which is something, especially might have chosen something which nobody really cares that much about. It's like you're not going to go for a stone cold classic and update it with a twist of, a bit of rapping and yodeling. You're not going to do that. But tracks of the Manscape, for example. I mean, Manscape is a very unloved record. Fantastic. So there's huge mining opportunities available there. To take, strip those songs back to the core and make new versions of them. So I think it's more coming from that. And then there's, of course, old songs where we do attempt to perform a piece pretty much as it was recorded. I mean, obviously we're not trying to do, complete facsimile.
But you want to give the audience something.
Give the audience a feeling like they're getting that song, and that's very familiar to them.
Do you get a sense of why something like Manscaped is underappreciated? Was it just context at the time?
It's rubbishly mixed.
Okay. The production.
The production is just... It's just, the original version of Small Black Reptile is laughable.
Yeah. Because I suspect oftentimes when something doesn't land the way you expect it to, maybe it's a surprise to you and you don't quite get it, or maybe it's just some other context you don't have control of.
It was in a period of... Wire didn't have it's not that it didn't have a direction. It had a strong instinct of what it ought to be doing, but didn't necessarily know how to do it in the 80s. It probably needed to happen what happened to me in the 90s, as I learned how to make productions with electronic equipment.
And it sounds like something that, for obvious reasons, you do have to describe kind of abstractly when you're talking about direction.
Yeah.
Can you put your finger on what you were going after at the time that you were able to achieve?
Wire has always been a contemporary band.
Yeah.
We always wanted to have a contemporary sound. So the instinct right from the beginning, from the ideal copy, was get the machines in. We didn't really know how to make that work. And also, perhaps, there was, especially in the mid-80s, it was kind of an either-or. You were either a stand-up playing band, or you were doing sequence stuff. There wasn't an in-between. There wasn't a way. And we were trying to kind of in-between it. And it didn't... And some of it worked, and some of it didn't work. And it was kind of difficult to figure out how to make that work. We couldn't be Depeche Mode or New Order because they had completely given over to working with the machines. Whereas we were working with machines, but we were not. We were also trying to incorporate live playing as well, and it wasn't. It was kind of. I think there were good moments in it, but I think probably in general you can see how that catalogue is regarded. The 80s catalogue is probably the lesser loved of the Wire catalogues. I mean, there's a couple of songs that people really like, but and from that, obviously the least liked record is Manscaped. It's famous amongst Wire fans for being the worst Wire record.
It must be the most difficult part as a band, like that, that period of being past sort of the initial peak and sort of trying to figure out how to move forward. Once you move past that,
the thing is that we were selling more records.
Yeah.
That was the weird thing. You see, this is hindsight. This is hindsight of the last decade.
Yeah. So it felt like you were moving the right way then. In some ways.
Of course. We didn't have any records in any charts in the 70s.
Yeah.
We had records in charts in the 80s. We were on MTV. We were playing to quite big audiences. I mean, we were a bigger band in the 80s than we were in the 70s. But we were a bit more as a live band. We didn't use any machines. We played live.
Yeah.
Did
that feel anachronistic at the time?
No, it just felt like what it felt. I mean, it's just like we did it how we did it, I mean, we figured it out. But I think the whole thing about Manscaped was the first time of okay, we're going to make a machine record, a complete machine record, which is not designed, is not taking some songs written in arranged in a rehearsal room and bringing into a studio and giving them a sort of electronic treatment. This is from the ground up, starting in the rehearsal room with sequences.
Was there, in this constant march forward, was there ever a time when you took a second, looked at it, and just realized we're very much kind of on the wrong track here and it's time to... No. You've trusted your instincts.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's always been the same. You know? I mean, coming back around at the end of the 90s and into the last decade with the Zen period stuff felt absolutely the right thing to be doing.
The idea of contemporary is an interesting one. You mentioned hindsight before. Oftentimes it's a lot easier to assess what a moment looks like, with a few years removed from it.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be contemporary in 2020 for Wire?
That's a good question. It's I think, well, the thing is one major thing that happened during the last decade is that music went off a timeline. Around 2005, there ceased to be that relentless march forward that always had been in popular music. I mean, if I look back to when I was young and I was super excited about the records I was hearing as a kid, whether it was Beatles or Motown or whatever, the idea in 1965 that you would be even slightly interested in a record that was made in the 50s was just preposterous beyond. That's old people's music. Now I'm walking in the supermarket and I'm hearing music that's over 50 years old as general part of the warp and weft and people are referencing kids who are teenagers who are just mad on the Beatles, or it's like none of that kind of timeline doesn't really exist anymore. It's like, but it's kind of like how it's worked with tech, endless refinement. What you have now is refinement of everything.
The point updates versus...
Yeah, exactly. So I've not heard anything which I thought, that is really something I've never heard before.
How long do you feel like it's been since something has really blown your mind that way?
Probably, I think I judged, the 90s are pretty much judged by street electronic music styles. And I think probably dubstep was the last one that I thought, that was something. And dubstep was just a kind of variation of drum and bass, really.
From my own standpoint, I'm always trying to figure out how much of my feelings toward contemporary music are an objective reaction to it and how much of it are just a result of kind of getting older, I mean, you do sort of remove yourself kind of from the context of it.
But I think... I don't know. It feels to me. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't. Maybe I'm not hearing the right things. It's possible. You can't cover all bases, especially if you're working on music. You're not going to be spending all your time listening to music, or only people who are frankly bonkers do that.
Does constantly pushing yourself, and I know you do make a point to try out new things or to move in new directions on every subsequent release. Is part of that having an ear to the ground for contemporary culture?
I think it's more to do with just what this gut feeling. I mean, I think Wire has... people are saying that Mind Hive is a more electronic record than perhaps the other. I think just the synthesizers are more prominent.
Yeah.
I mean, if I listen back to... that was the big difference between side A of 1020 and side B of 1020. Side A of 1020 actually hasn't got any keyboards on it at all. And side B has a lot. And I think they were creeping in Red Bark Tree, but quite subtle in the background, and now they get more and more foregrounded, those parts. And it's just how it feels natural,
One of the things that's remarkable about Wire versus just about all of your contemporaries and just, popular music bands in general is that very little of it actually... how you walk the line, how you stay contemporary without completely pinning something to a particular moment.
To be honest, I'll be super honest, I have no idea. I really have not, actually, I found myself in a few interviews this year saying, well, Wire is a contemporary band, whatever that means. I have really no idea anymore what that means. Yeah.
People don't feel like they're coming out to an oldie show. And unlike a lot of other bands that you came up with, maybe people won't be disappointed if every song isn't from, 1978.
Yeah, that's because we didn't trade on 1977 and 1978, and we certainly didn't trade on 1978 and 79. So there's nothing new in a way. So we're doing the same stuff we've always done.
But in a sense that keeps you more contemporary because you're not.
It just keeps us more contemporary to ourselves. I mean, I think Wire is to use contemporary parlance, Wire is a bubble. It lives in its own little universe.
Yeah.
Any band worth its own soul, I'm sure, does.
Yeah.
Entirely. So we do things that make sense to us.
I was speaking to the Red Cross guys recently, and his advice to younger bands coming up was, if you have a problem stick through it, because you're either going to break up now and get back together in 5 years, or because, at some point, if you reach a certain level of success, somebody's going to come knocking on your door and asking you to play shows again.
Yeah.
Do you get the feeling that if the band hadn't sort of continued on the way it has, that it would have been more kind of like a sentimental approach?
I don't think. The thing is, to be quite honest, they, and I include me in that they aren't much interested in it. They're not interested in doing like that circuit or doing, somebody, and we've put ourselves in a position now where we don't have to do that at all.
Yeah.
We don't get asked to do it. I mean, there's a punk festival in Britain called Rebellion, a really famous one. It's like every punk band plays there. And somebody said to me in an interview, have you ever played Rebellion? I said, no. He said, have you been asked? I said, no.
Well, you think people just have an expectation that, like, of course, Wire is not going to do that?
Yeah, I think they might have got it by now.
Yeah.
But, some people are like, but we can be incredibly perverse as well, as you'll see from tonight's song selection. So
yeah, what does perverse mean?
What does perverse?
No, I mean not what does perverse mean, but what does perverse mean in this context?
Well, and that's this you'll have to discover.
Okay,
I don't want to ruin it for you.
Yeah,
if you've not been looking at setlist.com or whatever it is
sure.
that puts all the teasers,
Yeah.
But if you don't know what's coming, then it's much better to have it as a surprise.
It's not antagonistic, though.
Oh no, not in any way. Not in any way. I think perverse is a very good description.
Yeah.
So it's okay. No, we're not going to do. We're not doing a whole evening of acoustic nose flute music.
That's another hard line to walk. Is like that there are groups out there, and part of staying ahead of the curve for them is almost like being an affront to the audience.
Yeah, no, that's also entirely pointless.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, in the end, people get sort of fed up with it. They'll pay for it once or twice. Yeah, I mean, so there are people lots of people who complain that we didn't play any Wire songs. That means we didn't play anything off Pink Flag, basically, because it's the only Wire record they know. Well, I'm sorry, you're not a Wire fan if that's the only Wire record you know. And it's technically you can't be. It just isn't the case.
And it sounds like finances aren't the primary thing keeping you on tour. What is it? Why?
We want to promote the record. There is a financial imperative in. If you promote the record, it will sell more, and we feel like we have to do it. But I mean, we have to think. I don't know when the next record's going to be. We're doing 2 this year, like London buses. You wait 3 years for one to come, and then two come at once. But I don't know when the next one is. There's a documentary to schedule. I'm trying to schedule them for January 2022. It's not my production, but I'm trying. We have to try and make things so that it's not like everything all comes at once. We have more possibilities of re-releases for next year. So it could be 2023 before there's another Wire record,
which is a normal amount of time for most bands. Like 3 years between records.
But I mean, what's going to happen by 2023?
Sure.
Then the first band member will be in their 70s.
Yeah.
Do you have to think really differently then about how you promote it, what you do, and how that works? And so these are, and also we're dealing with long-term legacy issues. This catalogue, it's not like in 20 years' time nobody's going to be wanting to listen to that music. I mean, in 20 years' time there may be less of us than there are now.
Yeah.
So we have to think about that. You have to take that seriously, and it's our business.
Rather than slowing down at this point, you're almost motivated to do more, to get out there more.
Not so much not to do more, but to think about. I don't know. It's just about. The thing is, I can't be precise because I'm not really sure how that works out.
Sure.
It's the thing that's in my head is that we have to somehow manage the period that comes after. We have the promotion of Mind Hive and 1020, so that's a year of work. Next year there will be a bit of a spin on from that. But then what comes after that? We have the documentary coming. We don't really have to do a lot for that, but it will be a piece of presence of Wire. And that starts to look like a retrospective exhibition.
That gets in that oldies act territory.
You get into that, well, not so much the oldies acts, but more like if you look at it from a fine art point of view. It's like here's a sort of, here the career statements are coming then, and then you wonder what you do. I would like to think that we won't just stop making records, but I'm not sure how much touring we'll do forever.
Do you still get pleasure out of the act of touring? Is that still enjoyable, or does it just feel like work at this point?
Depends. This has been hard work, obviously. A, the jet lag.
Tour,
A, the jet lag. B, the coronavirus. The fact that, we were supposed to finish up with South by Southwest and that got cancelled. We're supposed to be playing a show in Cambridge in 2 days' time, and, Massachusetts just got put on, I don't know what they call it, general alert, it's, the state of emergency.
Yeah.
So, what does that mean? What does any of that mean to us? Is there going to be a cost attached to us getting home early or something like that? I don't know. We are going to. Right now, we still have 2 shows planned in Austin, but whether they will happen or not, it may be that Austin will suddenly say they don't want anybody coming in, or I don't know.
Is there a fear at this point of losing momentum that if you do, wait too long to put out a record or tour? No. I'm not so worried about it. Actually, interesting. Wire records sell anyway. Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah.
There's still a bit more. There are things that happen when you tour. When you tour, your Spotify and your digital goes up. So it's not necessarily the songs you're playing or even the new album. It's in partly the new album.
Yeah.
Everything increases. So there is something, but nothing is ever as precise. It's not like if you do this, you get that.
Sure.
It doesn't necessarily work like that. Not in my experience, anyway.
You specifically seem to wear a lot of different hats in and around, the bands, the label. How did that start for you? Did you feel like it? Did you feel a necessity to move over to the business side, to be in charge of the books, things like that?
Well, the thing is that when Mark and I moved to Britain, we lived in Brussels in the 90s, in the 80s, and we moved in the early 90s to London, and we decided that we were going to do a production company, but then we were advised by Daniel Miller to do a record company, and so we started Swim, and we did 10 years of Swim, and that was before Wire came back round again. But by the time Wire came back round again, it sort of seemed inevitable that we were going to end up being our own record company, and they didn't know anything about how to run a record company, and I did.
Yeah. What was that process like?
There was just a complete inevitability about it. It just kind of figured it. Over the years, it's kind of figured out.
Yeah.
I've learned how to mix records, and I learned how to release records, and it's kind of what I do. But obviously, it involves a lot of trust. People have to trust me. Everybody loses. If there's a breakdown in trust, the band loses. Everybody loses, including me. So there's no point in kind of making a big thing out of it. I try and be as transparent as possible in the way that I deal with everything. It's just part of it. It's naturally how I feel anyway, and how I think it ought to be.
Is it hard for you to trust other people? Is it hard for you to delegate authority? Obviously you're working with people. You have a manager.
We don't have a manager.
Or you have the tour manager.
No, he's not a tour manager. He's front of house engineer.
Okay. You are working with some people,
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, we all work with promotion people.
Yeah.
You know Caroline.
I know
so
Caroline,
we with Caroline. We have, Kate and Ewan in the UK. There's distributor promo in different places. There's distributors that I tend to work with. There's live agents. I tend to have, everybody knows them, but, I tend to have the relationships with them. Yeah, sometimes it's a bit too much for me. Everybody comes to me.
Do you feel, though, just generally when it comes to the music and the final product, that you're a bit of a micromanager?
Yeah, probably. I try. It's just a matter of, it's not, as I said before, it's not rocket science, putting out records. I mean, it's all kind of about timing. I mean, when we did Read and Burn Mon, which was the first big Pink Flag release, I mean, we literally bunged it out. We did no promotion at all. And we sold a shitload of records in a really short period of time. It was like, whoa, what happened there? And you realise there's a market for it. You know, people want it. And then, obviously, now, you know, you can't get away without paying money for promotion. We do pay for promotion, all that kind of stuff. You just learn it. You just learn it. I'm not saying this is the only way of doing it. I mean, there's N ways of doing it, you know. But
I mean, it does seem increasingly like, you know, just because of the way the music industry is structured these days, that people have to do that. That a lot of people up to a certain level have to wear a lot of different hats because there's...
You know, does a painter, you know, take a sketch to a man in an office and say, you know, if you give me money, I'm going to make this into a finished painting. Yeah. You know, and it all depends on that taste of that person, whether you're going to get the money or not.
Sure.
So okay, a lot of people know how to make records now. And then, and anybody can get, you know, 1,000 records in their front row. You just have to pay for them. You know, it's like how you get them out of the front room into people's houses, into people's hands. How do you build fans? And, you know, but obviously a lot of people are doing that through social media, and some people spend way more time on social media than they do doing anything else. I find this... I'm quite bored by that. That's my weakest side. I really don't enjoy that side of it at all.
I noticed that the track list for the 1020 announcement really kind of has a breakdown very specifically of, you know, what it sounds like sonically, the drum beats, things like that. And in a sense, you're almost kind of playing your own critic.
Well, actually, there was Graham Duff who wrote the press release. I mean, that's how he writes about the music. Yeah. He's a huge fan, and he knows those pieces. Yeah. You know, he knows where they came from. He knows where they're going to. He's heard us play them live. You know, it is 1020 is very much rooted in the live set.
Yeah. You know, when I tend to approach things creatively, I don't know what it is in me, but once I'm done with something, I'm kind of just done with it. I want it out in the world.
Mainly I'm like that, but you know. Revisiting is always interesting. Yeah. It's about the opportunity. It's about whether you think something was really finished. I mean, you take something like, you know, German Shepherds. I mean, there is no definitive 80s version of German Shepherds. There are some not very good versions. And when that first came up, I knew it was a great song.
Was it a good exercise in sort of figuring out where you're at and how you've progressed as a songwriter to revisit some of these things?
Sometimes it's just having the skill to just strip something back to what actually it was, and then re-elaborate it rather than just get too carried away with how it was put together, you know, originally.
That's probably a useful skill too, is being able to sort of strip something down to, you know, as they say, like kill your darlings, to take out all of the unnecessary pieces and figure out what works.
Yeah, again, especially if nobody feels particularly attached to something, then it doesn't really, you know, it's just stuff.
After all these years, obviously, you know, the people who know Wire, but do you feel like there's still, you know, in your 60s, do you feel like there's still an image that needs to be cultivated?
I don't know about cultivating an image, but I feel like, you know, we could reach a bigger audience than the one that we reach. I don't know what our image is. I don't think people are coming for how we look. That's for sure.